Hi, greetings. I'm Rob Burrell from the University of South Florida. I'm going to be talking to you about my article, Myanmar's Civil War Reaches Fever Pitch, with international implications for China and India. Chance of the dictatorship's failure is certain at this point. In the region of Myanmar, in the Indochina region, multiple news stories have reported at least 77,840 deaths from 60,000 acts of violence in the last 24 months alone. Armed conflict location and event data ranks the violence in Myanmar as the second most extreme in the world for 2024. That's only surpassed by Palestine, which is number 1, and Syria, which is number 3. Most of the country has splintered into dozens of factions fighting the central government for autonomy. What you see here on this map illustrates the locations of Myanmar's hot zones by state or region. The number of deaths includes soldiers, militants, and civilians. Only the junta-controlled state of Yangon and Ai Yardwai remain relatively free of the escalating conflict. In these engagements, the military forces of Myanmar have taken significant casualties, certainly in the tens of thousands. This has forced the junta in 2024 to resort to a conscription campaign needed for an additional 60,000 recruits. Resistance organizations in the country during 2023 and 2025 remain dynamic and changing, with hundreds of competing, aligning, or merging with one another. The largest movements in terms of activity and membership over this time frame, with an armed component, include the National Unity Government, which you can see here on this slide. But it also includes the United League of Arakan, as well as the Karen National Union. Also the Kachin Independence Organization, Palong State Liberation Front, Myanmar National Truth and Justice Party, Karenni National Progressive Party, Pa'o National Liberation Organization. And meanwhile, on the border with India and Bangladesh, the Islamic terrorist group Iraq and Rohingya Salvation Army remains active and deadly. Perhaps the biggest recent change, the influential and historical nonviolent protest movement, the All Burma Students Democratic Front, ABSDF, continues to organize civil disobedience through academic institutions in the country. However, the students formed a small armed component called the ABSDF Army. This symbolic transition of ABSDF to armed insurrection signals the opposition to the junta has transitioned almost entirely to violence at this point, even from those who prefer nonviolent protest, like this student group. The following figure illustrates these resistance organizations across a continuum, from nonviolent protest on the left to civil war on the right, with the National Unity Government in 7 regions and the United League of Arakan in the west resembling competing states. Of note, the National Unity Government is chasing recognition from the European Union, and the United League of Arakan is seeking the same from China. So, the current military dictatorship, in short, is doomed. Based on the case study analysis completed in the study of internal conflict, available at the University of South Florida, go Bulls, the current Myanmar dictatorship has a 100% chance of failure. In short, this study, with data derived from 50 case studies, demonstrates that 5 essential factors are essential in determining the success or failure of counterinsurgency. Any one of these 5 factors indicates a government failure rate of over 94%. But in no cases did a government survive an insurgency with more than one of the 5 factors. Meanwhile, the civil war in Myanmar exhibits at least 3 of these factors. First, if less than 85% of the total population expresses something other than the national identity, then the government loses. A recent Myanmar survey found that 22% of the population prioritizes ethnic identity over national identity. Second, if less than 85% of the total population supports the current regime's legitimacy, then the government loses. In this case, 70% of the respondents in the same survey trusted the authority of the opposition movement, National Unity Government, over the junta. Finally, if the regime cannot fully isolate 85% of its population from insurgents, then the government loses. The current regime has lost territorial control over the majority of the country, indicating that most of the population has frequent contact with rebel groups. Based on the 5-factor analysis derived from the study of internal conflict, the current military regime has no chance of surviving the struggle. 0. There are a few recent events complicating the conflict and its trajectory. The first was a massive earthquake of 7.7 magnitude, which hit the center of the country in April 2025 and displaced hundreds of thousands of people, exacerbating human misfortunes in an already devastated war zone. The civil war combined with a natural disaster has made humanitarian relief nearly impossible for aid organizations. Another incident in May 2025 highlights India's frustration with Myanmar's refugees, with reports of human rights abuses. There is also recent reporting of an Indian militia named Assam Rifles attacking a Burmese militia aligned with the National Unity Government. Myanmar's western border region, shared with India and Bangladesh, with its Muslim Rohingya population, continues to comprise a lightning rod for internationalized interstate conflict. So what does the future hold for Myanmar? The resistance energy in Myanmar has reached staggering proportions and foretells that the insurgency will win. But what outcome will follow? One likely scenario, based on decades of ethnic infighting, is the continuation of more violence. When the military junta falls, the competing regional resistance movements, made up of distinct ethno-linguistic peoples, will likely defy centralized government from the capital of Yangon. Possibly the only scenario to curtail the violence would include dividing the current geography of Myanmar between the various groups, either creating independent nations or, at a minimum, autonomous states within a larger framework. At the moment, the only belligerent capable of possibly arbitrating such deals with the other groups would be the National Unity Government. Meanwhile, China, India, Bangladesh, and Thailand remain important stakeholders in the future of Myanmar. For more information on the Myanmar Civil War, you can see my February 2025 article in Small Wars Journal. Thank you for joining me here today for this update. Cheers.